loving me, I loving you.
How possible is it to overcome disability or cope with the associated challenges? Welcome to Make It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. Now, I find that term disability sometimes can be a bit offensive or is something that we really don't talk about often enough. Now, we have somebody here this time around to talk about that. Jonathan Joseph. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we're getting to have this important conversation today around the topic of disability.
Yes. And just in case somebody is yet to watch the other episode or listen to it and they don't know who Jonathan is, he's the CEO of Little Red Fashion. And tell us again briefly, Jonathan, what that is.
Sure, super briefly, Little Red Fashion is the first children's fashion tech and publishing company in history, and we write children's books and create educational materials about and through the lens of fashion for kids.
Okay. Thank you. Now, before we even get into the conversation, Jonathan, the word disability, define that.
Ooh, that's a tough one, even for me as a disability advocate. I think that a disability to me,
Mm-hmm.
disability to me is really a question of what you can do. I hate that answer. Let me rephrase that. I've never
Take your
actually been
time.
asked that point blank before, so that was an interesting moment. I would say that it depends on where you are. I think
Okay.
that disability is one's experience of disability is highly dependent on where they live and a number of like
Mm,
sociological
that is
and
true.
economic factors. And so for some, you know, living with unmedicated ADHD is definitely a disability, right? ADHD and and mental health conditions are disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we're talking about the legal definition of disability in the United States, we're talking about, a state that is defined by a certain statute, and it means that someone cannot perform any substantial gainful activity because of a medical or other impairment, whether it be, again, physical, psychological, or anything like that. But just because there are dictionary definitions of these terms,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important to bring these conversations back to the lived experience of disabled
Okay.
individuals. And so for me to talk about disability, for me as someone with both ADHD, um, cerebral palsy, and HIV, that's a lot. Those are a lot. That's a complex sort of layer cake of different disabilities and comorbidities. And the fact of the matter is, diabetes, also a disability, being overweight,
Mm-hmm.
also a disability. There are so many different types and layers and combinations of disability that's really hard to put one all-encompassing definition together for all of them,
Okay.
especially when you take into account the fact that one's experience of disability, again, is so highly dependent on the systems that they're being forced or have to interact with, whether that be systems of government, systems of the
Mm-hmm.
formalized medical field, or whether that be family systems and dynamics as well, and cultural systems. And so
Okay.
you have a number of systems interacting with individuals who may identify as disabled. So it's a broad category in
Okay.
my world. I have a
And
Big Ten philosophy.
okay. It's a nice segue then into how possible is it to even overcome? Because we're gonna talk about overcoming and the whole idea of coping. How possible, and just speaking from your own experience, how possible is it to overcome?
Well, I think that is highly dependent on the support structures available to an individual who identifies as disabled or differently abled. Um, because, with reasonable accommodations and the right support systems and access to the right healthcare, then yeah, I think it is much easier
Mm-hmm.
to overcome disability. I think that if you are, however, trapped with in a situation where you don't have access to adequate healthcare and you don't have access to differing therapies that may help you, complete day-to-day tasks or get certain things done in the day, in the everyday living, is going to be much more of a challenge to overcome those things, especially if there are structural barriers and systemic barriers in your way. If you live in a food desert and you are disabled, and it is, all the places that you could go get your food, or maybe they're not wheelchair accessible and you're in a wheelchair. Well, then going on your own to go shop for yourself is not something you can't overcome. Structural discrimination. You can't overcome things like in the United States, the structural prison that is benefit ceilings, right? So in the United States, if you're disabled and you make even a penny over a certain amount, you lose all of your benefits. Disabled people in the United States can't often get married, because then they'll have too many assets in concert with their spouse that they will lose all their other benefits. So when we talk about, overcoming disability, we also have to talk about how feasible overcoming disability really is for people within their specific constraints of the political and geographic reality that they're living, because it's highly dependent on that, for sure.
But how then can one then cope with all of the associated challenges, and based on some of all of what you just described?
I think one of the greatest things we can do is talk about these things more. I think, as someone who has multiple disabilities, I think community is more important than almost anything else, because if there's one thing I have learned over the years, the disability community is very resilient, and we are very, very aware of what it is like to navigate those challenges that are structural and out of our control. And so finding your group of fellow thrivers or copers or survivors, or however you want to call it, that makes you feel good, finding fellow disabled folks to talk to on a regular basis is very important. I think community and solidarity is essential for disabled individuals to learn how to better cope, because it's very easy to feel alone when you feel like you're a prisoner in your own body. Wow. There's no cell that gets smaller than your own cells. So, I think that is from a sort of psychological perspective, in terms of the background process and the subconscious level that many disabled folks might not even necessarily be aware of, because it's just running in the background for so long. Being able to tap into that and being able to build community to sort of do the best to shh that voice in your head is really beneficial and is a great coping skill. I also think it is through those conversations with other disabled people that we learn about resources that we may not have heard of before, or organizations that may be doing work that can help with some of those structural and systemic barriers to access or to equity. So community. I think community is huge for anyone either looking to cope or thrive with disability.
Often than not, a lot of us don't even think about those who might be experiencing some sort of disability, whether physical or otherwise. We're going to take a short break and take a word from our partners, and we're going to continue the conversation.
Langdo Language Institute was created to meet your language and communication needs. All of our packages were created just for you. We are passionate about language and dedicated to your success. We offer the CSEC English program, the Study Buddy program, the Get Ahead with English program, and the Business Communication program. Contact us at 767-285-0938 or email us at langdolanguage@gmail.com, because the real question is, how can we help you?
For all your events such as educational forums, workshops, book launches, weddings, and more, contact Noreen Daly, the ultimate MC and event host. Visit NoreenDaily.com or follow her on Instagram at NoreenDailyJam. Noreen Daily, creating long-lasting memories.
Are you looking for one-of-a-kind products customized to suit your needs? Then shop at Trending Things, the place where customization is always an option. From personalized gifts to apparel, accessories, drinkware, and home decor, you name it, we make it. Get your favorite designs on any item for party favors, weddings, graduations, or any special occasion, all at affordable prices. What are you waiting for? Visit our website at trendingthings.com to order your trendy item today. Trending Things, bringing creativity to the things you love.
Photography is an art. But more so, photography must come from the heart. Precious moments, priceless times. Take a pic and know it will turn out fine.
BMC Photography JA, beautiful moments captured. Let's go.
Do you have a disability, or do you have somebody close to you with a disability? If you have been paying attention before to this conversation, now is the time. Let's continue the conversation with Jonathan. For somebody who's listening who might say, where I am, yes, I have a disability, but I might not necessarily be able to find that community of of persons who are like me. What advice would you then have for that person? Because I then have a follow-up.
I have two pieces of advice. The first is, if you're accessing this podcast and you're hearing it, then you can find that community, because there's a wealth of amazing content creators, podcasters, TikTokers, Instagrammers, and on every social platform, there are disability advocates talking about building community and talking about the shared issues that we face. So they are out there, like they are. It might take some digging, it might take some looking. I definitely would recommend The Mighty to anyone. I've written like 2 pieces for The Mighty, but they are a great resource for community-driven, disability-focused content, articles, that advocacy, and that kind of a thing. I would also say to those people, if there are nonprofit or NGO related groups focused on your particular challenges, reach out to them and see if they have anything going on in your area, or if they have any affiliated organizations that may be doing small in-person sort of support groups and different things. Because a lot of the time, some of these things happen on the community-based organization level, but those organizations may be so small that they're not necessarily getting through all the noise on social media, and their messages may not be getting out there. So it definitely sometimes takes some diligence. And if you have a disability and you're not able to do that form of self-advocacy, then if you have a caretaker that you trust, if you have someone who is able to sort of do the legwork of that research for you, I know for some people that can be a huge difference. That can be the difference between accessing the help and not. So don't be afraid to outsource that if you have to. I think another thing a lot of disabled people forget is, like, it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to accept help if you are in a position to have help that you can take.
Okay. This is the follow-up now. For the rest of us because for me, based on what you said, a lot of us probably have other disabilities that we probably not even aware of, but that's for another conversation. For those of us who are saying, okay, so I don't see myself as somebody who has a disability, but I want to be able to be part of a community or to help people who are that way to cope. What advice do you have for us?
Well, for one thing, I will remind anyone who is fully able-bodied and healthy to realize something that many able-bodied people don't. We are all one accident away from being disabled. We are all, mine happened, like, those are kind of like my factory settings, that's me. But but it's not always the case. And many of us are a hair's width or one final destination cutscene away from disability. And that is just a reality. And it has always been a reality as long as we as humans have been existing. And so, my advice is to always lead from a place of empathy, but also to be a voice for the voiceless. If there is a particular affliction, issue, something that is maybe congenital and in your family, whatever your sort of touch point or access point to understanding disability more broadly is for you, tap into that, follow that thread, like pull at it a little bit, find out what organizations do work in that area. Like I find in advocacy, once you start learning about one issue, it kind of then it's like the Wikipedia effect. Like you end up like 30 different pages down the rabbit hole and you now research all these other things. And I think advocacy can be the same thing. And I think for someone who's looking to be an advocate, an ally, and to be part of championing the disability differently abled community, you only need to look as far as the people that you know and love to find someone who's dealing with some form of a disability that you can be an advocate for.
That right there, and the whole idea that we're one accident away, or if somebody's listening or watching and think are somewhat comfortable, that just now should have been a reminder that you just never know. You just never know. And then literally in a split second, one's life can change. Yes.
Yeah, and you also never know if the person you're looking at that looks totally, quote, normal is carrying an invisible disability that you don't see and that you don't, you wouldn't know looking at me that as someone with a ataxic CP, I age about 2 to 3 times faster than someone who doesn't have CP but would be my same age. So like ligaments and different things like that. Again, stuff you don't see. Just know that. That's, again, why we should approach, I think, everyone with that baseline empathy, because we don't know what's behind the scenes and we don't know what we don't know.
Yes. Thanks so much for sharing, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for having this important conversation.
Yes. Be the voice for the voiceless, and we are one accident away, people, if you got nothing else. It's just a reminder that we all just really need to be a little bit more caring to and for each other. This was Making It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, with other people. I'm Noreen Daly. Until next time.
Is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers.